Commander Jake Morrison stood in the communications room of Earth Defense Station Alpha, staring at the screen with dead eyes. 3 months had passed since New Helena fell silent. 3 months since 47,000 human beings stopped answering calls from their families back on Earth. 3 months since the Kratheon Empire decided that humans were easy targets. The first distress signal had come at 0600 station time. A garbled transmission from Colony Administrator Ben Walsh, screaming about ships in orbit and weapons fire hitting the residential sectors. The transmission cut off after 12 seconds. Nothing came after that except silence. It took 6 days for the nearest human ship to reach New Helena. What they found turned the stomachs of veterans who had seen combat across 3 star systems. The colony was gone. Not conquered. Not occupied. Simply destroyed. Jake watched the recovered footage for the 100th time. His hands shook as the images played across his screen. Kratheon soldiers in their dark armor, walking through burning streets. A school reduced to rubble. Small backpacks scattered in the debris. The hospital where Dr. Kevin Harris worked, its roof collapsed, the emergency medical symbol still visible on one standing wall. The door opened behind him. Amy Peterson entered, moving slowly like every step hurt. She was one of 43 survivors who made it off New Helena before the Kratheon ships destroyed the evacuation shuttles. Her face was hollow, her eyes empty of everything except memory. "Commander," she said quietly. "You asked to see me." Jake nodded and gestured to a chair. Amy sat down but kept her hands folded tight in her lap. "Tell me again what you saw," Jake said. His voice was rough. "I know it's hard, but Earth Command needs to hear it from survivors. They need to understand what happened." Amy took a shaky breath. "The ships came just after dawn. Big ones. Military cruisers. They didn't send any warnings or demands. They just started firing on the towns." She paused, her jaw working. "My kids were at school, Central Elementary. I was driving to work when the first explosions hit." Jake waited. He had read her statement a dozen times, but hearing her voice made it real in a way that text never could. "I turned the car around and drove toward the school." Amy continued. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The building was on fire. I could see it from 3 blocks away. Smoke everywhere. I ran toward it. But there were Kratheon soldiers in the streets. They had set up a perimeter. They wouldn't let anyone get close to the school." "Why?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "They wanted everyone inside to burn," Amy said flatly. "I heard the children screaming. I heard my daughter calling for me. The soldiers just stood there with their weapons, making sure no one could help. They watched it burn with all those kids inside." Jake closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Amy was staring at the wall. "I tried to fight past them," she said. "One of the soldiers hit me with his weapon, knocked me down. He said something in their language, and they all laughed. Then he pointed his gun at my head." She touched her forehead where a scar still showed. "He pulled the trigger, but the weapon misfired. Jammed or something. While he was clearing it, someone grabbed me and dragged me away. A neighbor. He got me to an emergency pod at the spaceport." "Kevin Harris was on your pod," Jake said. Amy nodded. "Dr. Harris. He ran the main hospital. He got out right before the Kratheon bombed it. He told me they targeted the hospital deliberately. Hit it with 3 missiles. There were over 200 patients inside. Sick people, injured people, children in the pediatric wing." Jake made himself watch her face as she spoke. He owed her that much. He owed all of them that much. "Why did they do it?" Amy asked suddenly. "We weren't soldiers. New Helena didn't even have a defense force. We grew food. We had farms and schools and normal lives. Why did they kill everyone?" "We found communications logs in the wreckage," Jake said carefully. "Encrypted Kratheon military channels. We broke the encryption 2 weeks ago." He pulled up a file on his screen. "The attack was ordered by High Commander Vex Thor. He believed humans were expanding too quickly into what he considered Kratheon territory. He wanted to send a message." "Oh, what message?" Amy's voice was sharp now. anger breaking through the numbness, that humans are weak, that we don't deserve the worlds we settle, that killing us has no consequences. Jake met her eyes. He specifically ordered his forces to target civilian populations, schools, hospitals, residential areas. He wanted maximum casualties with minimum military value. He thought Earth would accept it and withdraw from the sector. Amy stood up abruptly. Are we? Are we withdrawing? No, Jake said. He stood as well. Admiral Lisa Crawford has mobilized the Third Fleet. She's tracking the Krathion task force responsible for New Helena. We're going to find them and make them answer for what they did. Good, Amy said. The word came out hard and cold. I want them to pay. I want every single one of them to pay. Jake nodded slowly. There's something else. Earth Command received a summons from the Galactic Council. They want our diplomatic team at Council Station in 5 days. They say they're going to address the New Helena situation. Will they help us? Amy asked. Jake wanted to lie to her. He wanted to tell her that the Council would stand with humanity and demand justice. But he had been in military service for 20 years, and he knew how galactic politics worked. I don't know, he said instead. But Chris Bennett is leading our delegation. He's a good man. He'll fight for New Helena. Amy looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. Commander, she said without looking back. My daughter's name was Sophie. She was 7 years old. She loved drawing pictures of stars. My son was Matthew. He was 9. He wanted to be a pilot like his grandfather. Her voice cracked. Don't let the Council forget their names. Don't let anyone forget. I won't, Jake promised. Amy left. Jake stood alone in the communications room, surrounded by screens showing the ruins of New Helena. Somewhere, out in the dark, between stars, Admiral Crawford's fleet was hunting. Somewhere in Council Station, diplomats were preparing arguments and political strategies. But here in this room, Jake Morrison looked at the images of a burned school and a collapsed hospital and 47,000 graves that would never be dug because there was nothing left to bury. He thought about Sophie, who loved drawing stars, and Matthew, who wanted to fly. He thought about 200 patients who died in their hospital beds and teachers who died protecting their students. The Krathion thought humans were weak. They thought Earth would accept this massacre and move on. They thought wrong. Jake opened a secure channel to Admiral Crawford's flagship. When her face appeared on screen, he saw the same hard anger that he felt burning in his chest. Admiral, he said, Earth Command is authorizing full tactical operations. Find Vex Thor. Find every ship that participated in the attack. Find them all. Already on it. Commander, Lisa Crawford replied. Her voice was ice and iron. We're 3 days from the Krathion home system. When we get there, they're going to learn what happens when you murder human children. The channel closed. Jake looked one more time at the images from New Helena. Then he began preparing the full report for the diplomatic team. Chris Bennett needed to know everything. The Council needed to see exactly what the Krathion had done. And if the Council failed to act, Earth would act alone. Chris Bennett had never liked Council Station. The massive structure hung in neutral space between 6 major civilizations, a monument to compromise and careful politics. Today, walking through its gleaming corridors toward the Council chamber, he hated it. Captain Laura Hayes walked beside him, her military uniform crisp and perfect. Her hand rested near her sidearm out of habit. She had lost a cousin at New Helena, a teacher named Patricia who died when the school collapsed. Remember the plan, Chris said quietly. Let me do the talking. No matter what they say. Laura's jaw tightened. I'll try. The Council chamber was enormous, designed to make individual species feel small. Representatives from 40 different civilizations sat in tiered seats, rising up in a semicircle. At the center stood the speaker's platform, where Council Speaker Murendel of the Valanthi already waited. The Valanthi were old. Ancient, really. Their species had been traveling between stars when humans were still hunting with stone tools. Mirandel looked like a tall, thin mantis covered in silver skin. His 4 eyes watched Chris approach with what might have been pity or contempt. Chris couldn't tell. "Ambassador Bennett," Mirandel said. His voice came through a translator device that made it sound like wind through metal tubes. "Thank you for answering our summons so quickly." "Dine." Chris took his position in the speaker's circle at the chamber floor. Laura stood behind him at the proper distance for a military attaché. Around them, 40 species watched, with varying degrees of interest. "Speaker Mirandel," Chris said, "thank you for finally calling a session to address the massacre at New Helena. Earth is ready to present evidence and testimony regarding the Kratheon Empire's unprovoked attack on our civilian colony." Mirandel tilted his head in the Valanthe gesture that meant regret. "I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding, Ambassador. This session is not to prosecute the Kratheon. It is to prevent further violence." Chris felt his stomach drop. "I don't understand." "The Council has reviewed the incident at New Helena," Mirandel continued. "We acknowledge that civilian casualties occurred. However, the Council has determined that military retaliation by Earth would destabilize the current galactic political balance. Therefore, we are here to negotiate a peaceful resolution." The words hit Chris like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Laura suck in an angry breath. "Peaceful resolution?" Chris kept his voice level through sheer force of will. 47,000 human beings were murdered. The Kratheon Empire deliberately targeted schools and hospitals. We have evidence that High Commander Vex Thor personally ordered attacks on non-combatants. What peaceful resolution could possibly address that? A new voice spoke from the upper tiers. "Ambassador Zektar of the Zarn Collective. An insectoid species with a voice like clicking stones. The Kratheon Empire has agreed to pay reparations. 5 million credits to be distributed among the families of the deceased. Surely this demonstrates their willingness to make amends." Chris stared up at the Zarn representative. "You're offering us money? You think we can be paid to forget that our children were burned alive?" "The amount can be negotiated," Zektar said, as if discussing trade goods instead of murdered civilians. Chris turned back to Mirandel. "What about Vex Thor? What about the officers who carried out these attacks? Will they face justice?" Mirandel was quiet for a long moment. "The Council has decided that prosecuting Kratheon military officials would be a grave insult to their honor culture. Such an action could lead to wider conflict. Therefore, High Commander Vex Thor will remain in his position." "No consequences," Chris said flatly. "You're saying he faces no consequences for ordering the murder of 47,000 civilians? We prefer to call it an unfortunate incident resulting from territorial misunderstanding," said a crystalline Orion from the middle tier. Her voice chimed like bells. "The Kratheon believed they were defending their rightful territory. Prosecuting them for defending their interests would set a dangerous precedent." Laura stepped forward before Chris could stop her. "They bombed a school full of children. There were kids trapped inside burning buildings while Kratheon soldiers stood outside and laughed. That's not a misunderstanding. That's murder." "Captain Hayes," Mirandel said sharply, "you are not authorized to address this council. Return to your position." Laura didn't move. Her hand was definitely on her sidearm now. Chris put a hand on her arm and gently pulled her back. Her whole body was shaking with rage. Chris took a breath and looked around the chamber. He saw the truth in their eyes. The Valanthe needed Kratheon support for their mining operations in the outer territories. The Zarn owed the Kratheon trade debts going back decades. The Orions feared any shift in the power balance that might threaten their commercial interests. This wasn't about justice. It had never been about justice. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Chris said slowly. "The Council's position is that Earth should accept financial compensation and drop all military action against the Kratheon Empire. In exchange, High Commander Vex Thor faces no prosecution and remains in command of Kratheon forces. Is that accurate?" "That is the Council's recommendation, yes," Mirandel said. "We believe this serves the greater good of galactic peace. And if Earth refuses, Murandel's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Then Earth would be acting in violation of council law. There would be sanctions, trade restrictions, possible expulsion from council membership. We hope it does not come to that. Chris felt something cold settle in his chest. He had been a diplomat for 15 years. He had negotiated treaties and trade agreements. He had learned to compromise and find middle ground, but there was no middle ground between justice and surrender. I have a question for this council, Chris said. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. If the Krathion had attacked a Valanthi colony instead of a human one, would you be offering the same deal? If 47,000 Valanthi civilians had been murdered, would you accept credits and call it a misunderstanding? Murandel didn't answer. Neither did any of the other council members. What about you, Ambassador Zektar? Chris turned to face the Jarn. If Krathion ships bombed your hive worlds and killed your young, would 5 million credits buy your forgiveness? The Jarn representative clicked its mandibles but said nothing. Chris looked at each council member in turn. None of you would accept this. None of you would trade justice for your murdered children for political convenience. But you expect humans to do exactly that. Honor 7. The situations are not comparable, Murandel said stiffly. The Valanthi and Jarn are established council powers. Humanity is relatively new to galactic society. You must learn to accept council judgment in such matters. I see, Chris said quietly. So the real message is that human lives matter less than Valanthi lives or Jarn lives. Our children are less important than your political alliances. That is not what I said, Ambassador Bennett. It's exactly what you said. Chris pulled out his communication device. I need to send a message to Earth Command. I assume the Council won't object to that? Of course not, Murandel said. We hope Earth will see reason. Chris typed quickly, encoding the message with military encryption. The message was brief. The Council has abandoned us. They value Krathion political support more than justice for New Helena. They demand we stand down and accept payment instead of accountability. Requesting guidance from President Foster and Defense Council, he sent the message and put the device away. Then he looked up at Speaker Murandel. I've informed my government of the Council's position, Chris said. Earth will need time to consider your recommendation. How much time? Murandel asked. As much as we need. In the meantime, I have one more question. Chris paused. Does the Council know that Admiral Lisa Crawford's Third Fleet is currently in Krathion space? The chamber erupted. Representatives stood and shouted in a dozen languages. Murandel raised his arms for silence. The Council was not informed of this military action, he said, his voice sharp. Ambassador Bennett, you must order Admiral Crawford to withdraw immediately. This is a direct violation of Council protocols. I have no authority to give Admiral Crawford orders, Chris said calmly. I'm a diplomat, not a military commander. Besides, Earth Command authorized her mission before we received your summons. She's simply carrying out her assigned duties. What duties? Demanded the Orion representative. Tracking the Krathion task force responsible for New Helena. Gathering evidence. Preparing to apprehend High Commander Vexthor and his officers for trial on Earth. Chris smiled without any warmth. You know, what you should have done. This is unacceptable, Murandel said. The Council demands that Earth recall Admiral Crawford immediately. I'll pass along your demand, Chris said, but I wouldn't hold your breath. Earth takes the murder of its citizens very seriously. Unlike this Council, he turned and walked toward the exit. Laura followed, her hand still on her weapon. Behind them, the Council chamber filled with angry voices and threats of sanctions. In the corridor outside, Laura finally spoke. They're really not going to help us, are they? No, Chris said. They're going to protect the Krathion and punish us for seeking justice. What do we do now? Chris thought about Amy Peterson and her children, who died screaming in a burning school. He thought about Dr. Kevin Harris and the patients who burned in their hospital beds. He thought about 47,000 graves and a council that valued politics over basic decency. Now we go home, he said, "and we let Earth decide whether we need the Council's permission to protect our own people." President Danny Foster stood at the podium in the United Earth Assembly chamber. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the ruins of New Helena. In front of him, 300 representatives from every nation on Earth waited in silence. Danny was 62 years old. He had gray hair and kind eyes, and a reputation for careful diplomacy. He had won election by promising peace and prosperity. But today, looking at those ruins, he felt nothing but cold fury. "Members of the Assembly," he began. "3 months ago, the Kratheon Empire attacked our colony at New Helena. 47,000 human beings died. The Galactic Council has given us their answer to this atrocity. They offer us money and demand we forget." He paused and looked down at the tablet in his hands. "I'm going to read you some names. These are the children who died at Central Elementary School when Kratheon soldiers prevented anyone from rescuing them from the fire." The chamber went completely silent. Sophie Peterson, age 7. Matthew Peterson, age 9. Emma Rodriguez, age 6. Tyler Scott, age 8. Megan Clark, age 7. Danny's voice stayed steady as he read. Jacob White, age 9. Hannah Lee, age 6. Nathan Young, age 8. He kept reading. The names went on and on. Children who would never grow up. Students who would never graduate. Sons and daughters who would never come home. It took Danny 4 hours to read all the names. 3,847 children who died in schools across New Helena. When he finished, nobody in the chamber moved. Nobody spoke. The silence felt like a living thing. Danny looked up at the assembly. His eyes were red but dry. "The Galactic Council believes we should accept 5 million credits for these lives. They believe we should forget these names and move on. They believe politics is more important than justice." He set down the tablet. "I asked myself what kind of species humanity would be if we accepted that deal, what kind of future we would be building if we taught our children that murdered innocents can be bought and sold for political convenience." Defense Minister Karen Price stood from her seat. "Mr. President, what are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we give the Galactic Council our answer," Danny said. "Humanity rejects their authority to grant immunity for mass murder. We reject the idea that any amount of money can buy forgiveness for what happened at New Helena. And we reject their demand that we stand down while the people who did this go unpunished." The assembly erupted. Some representatives shouted approval. Others called for caution. Danny waited for the noise to die down. "The Council threatens sanctions if we pursue justice," he continued. "They threaten trade restrictions and expulsion. Let them. Earth survived before we met the Council. We'll survive after. But we will not survive losing our humanity. We will not become a species that accepts the murder of our children in exchange for membership in a corrupt political organization." Admiral Lisa Crawford's face appeared on the screen behind Danny, transmitted from her flagship in Kratheon space. "Mr. President, the Third Fleet is in position. We're ready to proceed on your orders." Danny looked at the assembly one more time. "I'm authorizing Admiral Crawford to continue her mission. Find High Commander Vex Thor. Find every officer who participated in planning or executing the New Helena massacre. Bring them back to Earth to stand trial. And if the Kratheon resist?" asked a representative from the back. "Then we go through them," Danny said simply. The vote was called. The assembly voted to support the president's decision by a margin of 273 to 27. Earth would seek justice, with or without the Council's permission. Admiral Crawford received the authorization and began moving her fleet deeper into Kratheon space. She commanded 47 ships, chosen deliberately to match the number of thousands who died at New Helena. Every captain knew they were going into enemy territory against a numerically superior force. None of them asked to turn back. On the bridge of the carrier Valiant, Lisa Crawford studied the tactical displays. The Kratheon Home Defense Fleet was mobilizing. 73 ships against her 47. On paper, it looked like a losing fight. But Lisa had been preparing for this moment since she first saw the images from New Helena. Her crews were ready. Her ships carried new weapons and defensive systems rushed into production after the massacre. And most importantly, her people were fighting for something more than territory or politics. "Admiral," said Commander Gary Phillips at the tactical station, "we're picking up transmissions from the Kratheon fleet. They're demanding we withdraw from their space immediately." "Ignore them," Lisa said. "Keep advancing. Helm, set course for Vex Thor's flagship. Sensors, I want constant tracking on that ship. He's not getting away." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Nicole Parker led her special operations team aboard a modified stealth shuttle. Their mission was dangerous, and maybe impossible. Infiltrate Vex Thor's flagship, download his military logs, and if possible, capture him alive. Nicole had volunteered for this mission knowing she might not come back. She had read the testimonies from New Helena survivors. She had seen the footage of children dying. If she could bring the man responsible to justice, her life would be well spent. 2 minutes to insertion point, said the shuttle pilot. Kratheon sensors haven't detected us yet. Oh. Nicole checked her team's equipment one last time. 6 soldiers, the best Earth had. They wore captured Kratheon armor modified to fit human frames. They carried weapons designed to penetrate Kratheon shields, and they all knew the target was more important than their own survival. "Remember the mission," Nicole said quietly. "We need Vex Thor's logs, evidence that proves he ordered attacks on civilians. Everything else is secondary." "Including Vex Thor himself?" asked Sergeant Ryan Martinez. "If we can take him alive." "We do," Nicole said. "But the evidence comes first. The galaxy needs to see proof that this was deliberate murder, not a military accident." The shuttle docked with Vex Thor's flagship using stolen access codes. The Kratheon security systems accepted the codes and opened the airlock. Nicole's team moved into the ship, weapons ready. The corridors were empty. Most of the crew was at battle stations preparing to engage the human fleet. Nicole led her team toward the command deck, moving quickly through the alien architecture. They found the data core on the 3rd level. Nicole plugged her extraction device into the Kratheon systems and started downloading. The files were massive. Months of communications, orders, and logs. She could see Vex Thor's personal files in the directory. "Got it," she whispered. "All the communications leading up to New Helena. Vex Thor's orders. Everything." As the download completed, Admiral Crawford's fleet engaged the Kratheon Home Defense Force. The battle lit up the space around the planet, with weapons, fire, and exploding ships. Lisa watched from her command chair as her ships tore into the Kratheon formation. The enemy had numbers, but human crews fought with desperate determination. Every ship that fell took Kratheon vessels with it. "Broadcast those files on all frequencies," Lisa ordered. "I want every ship in this system to hear what Vex Thor did." The communications officer began transmitting. Nicole's downloaded files played across every channel. Vex Thor's own voice, translated to multiple languages, gave orders to target schools, to bomb hospitals, to maximize civilian casualties. His contempt for humans dripped from every word. The Kratheon fleet faltered as their own commander's words echoed through space. Some ships slowed, their crews shocked by what they were hearing. Others fought harder, trying to silence the humans who dared to expose their high commander's crimes. On board Vex Thor's flagship, alarms began blaring. Nicole's team had been discovered. Kratheon soldiers poured into the corridor. Weapons raised. "Time to go," Nicole said. Her team fought their way back toward the shuttle, leaving a trail of disabled Kratheon guards behind them. They weren't trying to kill everyone they met, they just needed to escape with the evidence. But as they reached the docking level, they saw Kratheon soldiers cutting through the airlock to their shuttle. Their escape route was compromised. "New plan," Nicole said. She pulled up a map of the ship on her wrist display. "Engineering section. They'll have escape pods there." The team changed direction, moving deeper into the ship. Behind them, more alarms sounded. The entire vessel was now hunting for the human infiltrators. They found the engineering section and the escape pods. But they also found High Commander Vex Thor himself. The Kratheon commander stood in front of an open pod, preparing to flee his own flagship. Vexisthor was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and armor covered in rank insignia. He turned as Nicole's team entered and reached for a weapon. "Don't," Nicole said, aiming her rifle at his head. "We can do this easy or hard." "Your choice." Vexthor laughed. It sounded like grinding metal. "You think you can take me, human? I am High Commander of the Kratheon 8th Fleet. I have conquered 17 worlds. I will not surrender to inferior prey." "You murdered 47,000 civilians," Nicole said. Her voice was ice. "You ordered attacks on schools and hospitals. You're not a commander. You're a coward who kills children." Vexthor's 4 eyes narrowed. He charged forward, trying to use his size advantage. Nicole's team opened fire, aiming for joints in his armor. The High Commander stumbled and fell, his legs disabled by precise shots. "I said easy or hard," Nicole said, standing over him. "You chose hard." "I think for..." They dragged Vexthor into the escape pod and sealed it. The pod ejected from the flagship and rocketed toward the human fleet. Admiral Crawford's ships picked it up and brought it aboard the Valiant. When Lisa Crawford entered the holding cell and saw Vexthor in chains, she felt no satisfaction, only grim determination to see this through. "High Commander," she said, "you're under arrest for crimes against humanity. You'll be transported to Earth to stand trial. I suggest you prepare a defense." Vexthor glared at her with all 4 eyes. "The Council will never allow this. You are violating every law of civilized space." "The Council had their chance to deliver justice," Lisa said. "They chose politics instead, so humanity will deliver our own justice." The battle in Kratheon space continued for 6 more hours. When it ended, 23 human ships were destroyed or disabled. Over 8,000 human military personnel died, but the Third Fleet had captured Vexthor and 67 of his senior officers. And they had the evidence that would show the galaxy exactly what the Kratheon had done. As the surviving ships prepared to leave Kratheon space, the Galactic Council sent an emergency transmission. They issued a formal censure of Earth's military action. They demanded the immediate release of all Kratheon prisoners. They threatened severe sanctions. President Danny Foster read the Council's demands and sent a 1-word reply: "No." The Kratheon Empire responded to Vexisthor's capture with outrage. Within hours, their emperor issued a declaration of war against humanity. Kratheon fleets mobilized across their territory. Their allies in the Galactic Council issued statements of support. Admiral Lisa Crawford's damaged fleet limped toward human space, carrying their prisoners and their dead. The journey would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which the galaxy would decide what side they were on. On Council Station, Speaker Murrendell called an emergency session. Representatives packed the chamber. This time, Chris Bennett sat in the accused's circle, like a criminal on trial. "Ambassador Bennett," Murrendell said coldly, "Earth has committed an act of war against a Council member state. You attacked Kratheon home space, killed their defenders, and kidnapped their High Commander. This cannot stand." Chris stood calmly in the circle. "We arrested a war criminal who ordered the mass murder of civilians. We did what the Council refused to do." "You violated Kratheon sovereignty," said the Zharn representative. "You ignored Council protocols. You have destabilized the entire galactic order." "The galactic order was already broken," Chris said. "It broke when you decided politics was more important than justice." The Orion representative chimed in, her crystalline voice sharp. "The Council demands Earth release all Kratheon prisoners immediately, and pay reparations for the damage to Kratheon forces." "No," Chris said simply. "Then Earth will face sanctions," Murrendell declared. "All Council members are hereby ordered to cease trade with human worlds. All human ships are banned from Council space. All treaties and agreements with Earth are suspended." Chris looked around the chamber. He saw species that had traded with Earth for decades, now turning their backs because the Council ordered it. He saw allies becoming enemies because humans dared to seek justice for murdered children. "I have an announcement." Chris said. President Foster has authorized me to deliver Earth's formal response to the Council's threats. He pulled out a document and began reading. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council. We reject the Council's authority over human affairs. We will establish our own alliances with species who value justice over political convenience. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted and argued. Mirandel banged his ceremonial staff, demanding order. You cannot simply leave the Council, Mirandel said. There are procedures, treaties, obligations. Watch us, Chris said. He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, 40 species argued about what to do with the humans who refused to follow their rules. But 3 species stayed quiet. The Korthon, a feline race that had been subjugated by the Kratheon for decades. The Minari, an amphibious species that had lost colonies to Kratheon expansion. And the Sylvans, a plant-based civilization that had filed 17 formal complaints against Kratheon aggression. All ignored by the Council. These species watched the humans walk away and began to wonder if maybe Earth had the right idea. Meanwhile, in human space, preparations for war continued. Every military ship was recalled to Earth. Orbital defenses were reinforced. Civilian transports were armed and converted to military service. Captain Greg Turner commanded the destroyer Defender, a 30-year-old ship held together more by determination than proper engineering. His crew of 340 knew they were flying a relic, but when the call came to defend human space, not one person requested transfer. Captain, said his executive officer, Lieutenant Julie Morgan. New orders from Fleet Command. We're being assigned to escort duty for Admiral Crawford's return fleet. Greg nodded. Plot an intercept course. Let's bring our people home. The Defender joined 20 other ships racing to meet Crawford's damaged fleet. They rendezvoused 4 days from Earth, forming a protective screen around the wounded vessels. That's when the Kratheon struck. A Kratheon battle group had been shadowing Crawford's fleet, waiting for the right moment. They attacked when the human ships were spread thin, trying to protect the damaged vessels. Alarms blared across the Defender's bridge. Greg watched as Kratheon cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly ahead of them. All hands to battle stations, he ordered. Weapons. Target the lead cruiser. Helm. Put us between them and the Valiant. The Defender charged forward, her old weapons blazing. The ship shuddered as Kratheon return fire hit her shields. Warning lights flashed across every console. Shields at 60%, Julie reported. Hull breach on Deck 4. Damage control teams responding. Greg kept his eyes on the tactical display. The Kratheon were trying to break through and destroy Admiral Crawford's flagship. If they killed Crawford and Vex Thor, the whole mission would be for nothing. All power to forward shields, Greg ordered, close to ramming distance. Captain? Julie stared at him. You heard me. If they want the Valiant, they have to go through us. The Defender accelerated, her aging engines straining. Kratheon weapons hammered the small destroyer. The shields failed. Hull plating burned away. Compartments vented to space, but the Defender kept going. Collision warning, said the helm officer. Impact in 30 seconds. Evacuate all non-essential decks, Greg ordered. Julie, get to the escape pods. Take everyone who can move. I'm not leaving the bridge, sir, Julie said firmly. Greg smiled sadly. I know. Neither am I. The Defender struck the Kratheon battlecruiser at full speed. The impact tore both ships apart. The destroyer's reactor went critical 3 seconds later, consuming both vessels in a ball of fire. 340 humans died with the Defender, but the Kratheon attack faltered. The other human escort ships rallied and drove off the remaining Kratheon vessels. Admiral Crawford's fleet continued toward Earth, carrying their prisoners and their fallen heroes. On Earth, President Danny Foster received the casualty reports. The Defender, 2 other escort ships, over 1,000 more dead, added to the 8,000 lost at the Kratheon home system. Humanity had paid a heavy price for justice. But when Foster addressed the public, he didn't speak of the cost. He spoke of the courage. Of Captain Turner and his crew, who gave everything to protect their comrades. Of Admiral Crawford and her fleet who captured the monster responsible for New Helena. The Galactic Council calls us criminals, Danny said. They say we violated their laws by seeking justice. Let me tell you what I think of laws that protect murderers and punish victims. Let me tell you what I think of a council that values politics over the lives of children. He paused, letting his anger show. Earth stands alone now. The council has turned their backs on us. Our former allies have abandoned us. But we still have something they don't. We have the knowledge that we did the right thing. We have the certainty that when our children were murdered, we did not accept payment and move on. We fought back. Messages of support began flooding in from unexpected sources. The Korthan sent a secret transmission pledging their support for Earth. The Minari offered medical supplies and resources. The Sylvans opened their trade routes to human ships. And then, 2 days before Admiral Crawford's fleet reached Earth, a message arrived from a species humanity had never contacted before. The Vakar, a silicon-based civilization from the Outer Rim, had been watching the situation unfold. Their message was brief. We have seen what the Council truly is. We have seen what humanity stands for. When you are ready to build something better than the Council, contact us. We will stand with you. Admiral Crawford's fleet entered Earth orbit to a hero's welcome. Millions watched as the ships docked at the orbital stations. Billions more watched as High Commander Vex Thor was transferred to a secure facility to await trial. Amy Peterson stood in a crowd at the main spaceport, watching shuttles bring home the survivors. She saw Admiral Crawford descend the ramp, looking exhausted but unbroken. She saw Nicole Parker and her team, carrying the data that would prove Vex Thor's guilt to the galaxy, and she saw the flag-draped containers holding the remains of those who died, bringing justice home. Over 9,000 humans who would never see their families again. A reporter pushed through the crowd and shoved a microphone at Amy. Mrs. Peterson, you're one of the New Helena survivors. What do you think about what Earth has done? Was it worth the cost? Quote, Amy looked at the reporter. Then she looked at Admiral Crawford and the fallen heroes and the prisoners who would finally face justice. My children died screaming in a burning school, Amy said quietly. The Galactic Council wanted me to accept money and forget about them. Instead, Earth fought. People died to bring my children's murderers to justice. Was it worth it? She wiped tears from her eyes. Ask me that question. After Vex Thor stands trial, and the galaxy sees what he really is. Ask me. After every species knows that humans protect their own, the reporter started to ask another question, but Amy turned and walked away. She had said everything that mattered. On Council Station, Speaker Mirandel watched the broadcasts from Earth with growing concern. The humans were not backing down. Worse, other species were beginning to question the Council's authority. The Korthan, Minari, and Sylvans had all sent formal requests to review their Council memberships. The galactic order that had stood for 1,000 years was beginning to crack. And it was cracking because humanity refused to accept that murdered children didn't matter. Mirandel realized too late that the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had bet that humans would choose peace over justice. They had bet wrong. 6 months after New Helena burned, High Commander Vex Thor stood in a courtroom on Earth. The trial was held in Geneva. Broadcast to every human world and transmitted across the galaxy on open channels. Anyone who wanted to watch could watch. The courtroom was simple and plain. No grand architecture or intimidating design. Just a room with judges, prosecutors, defenders, and the accused. Vex Thor sat in a reinforced cage, his 4 arms shackled, his armor stripped away. Judge Margaret Thompson, a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, presided over the trial. She had served on the International Criminal Court for 20 years before being selected to judge this case. High Commander Vex Thor, she said in a clear voice. You are charged with ordering the deliberate murder of 47,000 civilians, including 3,847 children. You are charged with targeting hospitals, schools, and residential areas with the intent to maximize casualties. You are charged with crimes against sentient beings. How do you plead? Vex Thor's translator device crackled. I do not recognize this court's authority. I am a military commander acting under legitimate orders from my government. Your laws do not apply to me. Your plea is recorded as not guilty, Judge Thompson said. Let the trial begin. For 3 weeks, prosecutors presented evidence. They showed communications logs recovered by Nicole Parker's team, Vex's Thor's own voice, giving orders to target schools, his messages to subordinates, expressing contempt for human weakness, his reports to the Kratheon Emperor, boasting about the civilian death count, survivors testified. Amy Peterson took the stand and described watching her children's school burn, while Kratheon soldiers laughed and prevented rescue. Dr. Kevin Harris testified about the hospital bombing, about patients who died in their beds because Vex Thor wanted maximum casualties. The defense argued that Vex Thor was following Kratheon military doctrine, that he was acting under orders from his government, that different species have different concepts of acceptable warfare. The Kratheon do not see a meaningful distinction between civilian and military targets, the defense attorney said. To prosecute my client for following his culture's standards is to impose human values on a non-human species. Prosecutor Daniel Rivera stood and addressed the court. The question is not whether Kratheon culture permits the murder of children. The question is whether the murder of children can ever be acceptable under any culture's standards. He turned to face Vexy Thor. The accused gave orders to bomb schools. He knew children were inside. He ordered his soldiers to prevent rescue. These are not the actions of a military commander engaged in legitimate warfare. These are the actions of someone who enjoys killing the helpless. The trial continued. Expert witnesses testified about Kratheon military law and found that even under their own codes, targeting hospitals violated rules of war. Communications analysts showed that Vex Thor had specifically chosen civilian targets over nearby military installations, and through it all, Vex Thor showed no remorse. He sat in his cage, 4 eyes burning with contempt for the humans who dared to judge him. On the 19th day of trial, Amy Peterson was called back to testify. Prosecutor Rivera asked her to describe her last conversation with her daughter. Sophie called me the night before, Amy said softly. She was excited because she had drawn a picture of Earth from space. She wanted to show me when I got home from work, she said. Amy's voice broke. She took a breath. She said she loved me and couldn't wait to see me. Those were the last words she ever said to me. Rivera turned to Vex's Thor. Did you know that children like Sophie were in those schools when you ordered them bombed? Yes, Vex Thor said. His translator made his voice sound bored. Did you consider showing mercy to non-combatants? No. Mercy is weakness. Humans are weak. Therefore they deserved no mercy. Rivera let the words hang in the air. Then he turned back to the judges. The prosecution rests. The defense presented their closing arguments. They emphasized that Vex Thor was a product of his culture, that judging him by human standards was unfair, that convicting him would set a dangerous precedent for prosecuting military leaders of other species. Prosecutor Rivera gave the final closing statement. The defense asks us to accept cultural relativism, to say that some species are allowed to murder children because their culture permits it. I reject that argument completely. There are certain acts that transcend culture. Murder of the innocent is one of them. The deliberate targeting of schools and hospitals is one of them. What High Commander Vex Thor did at New Helena was not war, it was slaughter. And no culture, no military doctrine, no political consideration can make it acceptable. The 3 judges deliberated for 2 days. When they returned to the courtroom, the galaxy was watching. Judge Thompson read the verdict. We find the defendant guilty on all charges. The evidence is overwhelming that High Commander Vex's Thor deliberately ordered attacks on civilian targets with the specific intent to maximize casualties among non-combatants. His own logs prove his contempt for human life and his enjoyment of their suffering. His actions constitute crimes against sentient beings under any reasonable definition. She paused and looked directly at Vex's Thor. The sentence is life imprisonment under maximum security. You will spend the rest of your natural life confined. thinking about the children you murdered. You will never be released. You will never be exchanged. You will die in a human prison, alone and forgotten. Vex's Thor surged against his restraints, shouting in his own language. The translator couldn't keep up, but the rage was clear. He had expected rescue, or at least eventual freedom. The reality of permanent imprisonment hit him like a physical blow. Guards removed him from the courtroom. The trial was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The Galactic Council issued a formal condemnation of the trial. They declared it illegal and demanded Vex's Thor's release. Earth ignored them. President Danny Foster gave a speech explaining that Earth no longer recognized Council authority over human affairs. "We offered the Council a chance to deliver justice," Danny said. "They chose to protect a murderer instead, so we delivered justice ourselves. And we will continue to do so, with or without their approval." Then something unexpected happened. The Korthan government announced they were leaving the Galactic Council. Their representatives made a formal statement. "For 70 years, the Kratheon Empire has oppressed our people," the Korthan ambassador said. "We filed complaints with the Council. We presented evidence of atrocities. The Council did nothing because the Kratheon had powerful friends. We watched humanity seek justice for their murdered children, and we saw the Council choose politics over right and wrong. We will not be part of that anymore." Within a week, the Minari and Sylvans followed, 3 species withdrawing from the Council in protest. And more were considering it. Ambassador Chris Bennett found himself hosting a very different kind of diplomatic meeting. Representatives from the Korthan, Minari, Sylvans, and 5 other species gathered on Earth to discuss forming a new alliance. "We need something better than the Council," said the Korthan representative, a feline-featured female named Kira. "An organization that actually protects its members instead of sacrificing them for political convenience. We propose the Terran Alliance," Chris said. He displayed a draft charter on the screen. Mutual defense, fair trade, and most importantly, a commitment that crimes like New Helena will never be ignored for political reasons. Any member species that deliberately targets civilians will face prosecution. No exceptions. No immunity. The representatives discussed and debated. They modified the charter. They argued over details, but in the end, 8 species signed the founding document of the Terran Alliance. It wasn't as large as the Galactic Council. It didn't have the ancient history or established power, but it had something the Council lacked: the moral authority that comes from actually standing up for justice. On Council Station, Speaker Murandel watched his carefully maintained galactic order crumble. More species were filing withdrawal notices. Trade networks were realigning. The Kratheon Empire, weakened and humiliated by Vex's Thor's capture, faced internal rebellions from subject species who saw that the mighty Kratheon could be held accountable. The Council tried sanctions against Earth and the new alliance. They failed. The alliance members simply traded with each other, forming new economic partnerships. They tried diplomatic pressure. It failed too. Species that had suffered under Council inaction now had an alternative. Admiral Lisa Crawford retired from active military service after the trial. She became director of the New Helena Memorial Foundation, a position she took very seriously. Every year on the anniversary of the massacre, humanity held a remembrance ceremony. All 47,000 names were read aloud. It took hours, but every single person was named and remembered. Amy Peterson attended every ceremony. She brought flowers for Sophie and Matthew. She stood with other survivors and families of the dead, and together they ensured the galaxy would never forget what happened. On the 5th anniversary, Amy noticed a young Valanthe in the crowd. The alien approached her hesitantly. "Mrs. Peterson," the Valanthe said through a translator. "My name is Senthal. I am a student at Earth University. I wanted to tell you that I am sorry for what my government did. The Council should have helped you. Instead, they betrayed you." Amy studied the young alien. Senthal couldn't have been more than 20 in human years. Too young to have been involved in the Council's decisions. "Why are you here?" Amy asked. "Because I want to be part of something better," Senthal said. "My government still supports the Council, but many young Valanthe don't. We've been watching what Earth built with the Terran Alliance. We see how you actually protect each other. Some of us are working to change Valanthy policy from within. Amy looked at the memorial wall, at her children's names carved in stone. Then she looked back at Senthal. "Thank you for coming," she said. "And thank you for seeing the truth. The Council wanted peace at any price. Humanity chose justice instead. I think we made the right choice." "I think so too," Senthal said. They stood together in silence, honoring the dead and hoping for a better future. Chris Bennett, now Secretary General of the Terran Alliance, worked from an office in Geneva. His wall displayed a quote that President Danny Foster had made during the crisis. "Peace without justice is surrender. Justice without courage is impossible." New species approached the Alliance regularly now. Some were small civilizations tired of being ignored by the Council. Others were larger powers who saw the writing on the wall. The galaxy was changing. The Kratheon Empire never recovered from the loss of Vex Thor. Their subject species rebelled. Their allies abandoned them. Within 10 years, the once mighty empire fractured into a dozen smaller states, most of which joined the Terran Alliance. The Galactic Council still existed, but its membership and power continued to decline. Species realized that an organization willing to ignore mass murder of civilians for political convenience had no moral authority to lead anyone, and through it all, Earth's fleet patrolled Alliance space and allied territories. The ships no longer bore Council insignia. Instead, they carried their own symbols and a simple motto: never again. Admiral Crawford, now elderly and gray, gave one final speech at the 30th anniversary of New Helena. Thousands attended in person. Millions watched across Alliance space. 30 years ago, the Kratheon Empire murdered 47,000 civilians, she said. The Galactic Council told us to accept payment and forget. Instead, we fought. We sacrificed. We showed the galaxy that some things matter more than politics or peace. We showed them that humanity protects its own. She gestured to the memorial wall behind her, with all 47,000 names. These people did not die in vain. They died because evil exists in the galaxy. But their deaths led to something good. They led to a galaxy where species actually defend each other, where criminals face justice instead of political protection, where children matter more than alliances. Lisa paused and looked at the crowd. The Council wanted peace. Humanity chose vengeance. But what we got was something better than either. We got justice. We got accountability. And we got a galaxy that's better than the one we inherited. She finished her speech and stepped down. The crowd stood in silence as the names began to be read. All 47,000. Every year. Never forgotten. Amy Peterson, now 73 years old, stood with her hand on her children's names. She thought about Sophie, who loved drawing stars. She thought about Matthew, who wanted to fly. And she thought about a species that refused to accept that their murdered children didn't matter. A species that chose to fight even when the entire galaxy told them to stand down. A species that built something better from the ashes of tragedy. The Galactic Council had ordered peace. Humanity chose vengeance. But in the end, they achieved something far more important than either. They proved that justice was possible, even against impossible odds. They proved that some principles were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And the galaxy would never be the same.